What's going on, guys? Mr. Acolyte here, coming at you with the visual guide for the latest big balance patch for Grand Blue Fantasy Versus Rising. There are a lot of changes, system-wide changes, character changes, all that good stuff. This is definitely going to shake up the meta completely, so let's not waste any time and jump right on into it. Let's go ahead and start with the changes to the system mechanics, as these affect every character in the game for the most part. The first major change is to most characters' long-range L. So most distance Ls that hit high up like this, I chose Djeeta because she's a good example of it. Anyone whose 5L hits up high like this had the hitbox extended downward so that it is harder to duck. This is a good change because any character that has a button like this is just going to make their offense stronger when they're in range to poke with an L. So this is a nice change across the board. Next up is the big one. I'm sure you've probably already heard of it by now. You might have even seen my short on it, but they did a massive amount of nerfs to the dash attack all across the board. Possibly the biggest and most notable is the distance traveled. Dash attacks just do not travel the same distance as they did before. Depending on the character, this may be the case because some characters such as Cag already had a pretty stubby one, but anyone like Gran, Djeeta, so on and so forth, Nier, characters who really lunged a great distance have all had the distance reduced on all dash attacks. And on top of that, the pushback on block has been increased. So not only do you travel a shorter distance, but you also push back further. So as you can see, if I connect my dash attack, you can see how considerable the gap is now between you and the opponent. Especially if you hit from tip range, you are no longer in range to threaten a throw mix-up. From here, the opponent is so far away that you can't even connect with your 5L. It used to be, as long as you did this, everyone's 5L was basically guaranteed, like you had to take some pressure and basically be locked, but that's not the case anymore. Even this situation right here is not as threatening because you know you can swing out of it. And that's also in part to another part of the dash attack nerfs is they've expanded the hurt box on it. Not only during the startup, your hurt box is bigger, but all dash attacks are more susceptible to low strikes. So now when you are doing a dash attack, your low hurt box is extended, which helps people be able to counter poke you and basically prevent you from just locking them in place with dash attacks and just doing dash attacks over and over and over. And on top of all those, they also increased the recovery. So when you whiff a dash attack, as you can see, you are now minus 25. It used to be minus 20, so it is 5 frames more recovery. This most likely means that it'll be harder for people to whiff a dash attack and then anti-air, or whiff on a dash attack and counter poke you, or whiff a dash attack and do another one. All that kind of stuff is going to be harder to do going forward. And the final system mechanic change is to Brave Counter. This is a pretty situational one, but it's definitely going to affect matches here and there for sure. What they did to Brave Counter is if your health is at 500 or lower, it will no longer do any damage. And if your health is above 500, it cannot knock you below 500. So basically the reason they did this is because they don't want guaranteed chip scenarios, because before, if you did this and then you just supered, the person might be doomed and just guaranteed to be chipped to death, which was definitely the case. So they don't want that situation in the game anymore. So now if your health falls to a certain level, you don't have to worry about being guaranteed chip killed. So now let's go through the individual character changes one by one. Some of them are pretty short, so if this is going to go pretty quick, we're going to go ahead and start with Gran. Gran is very simple. They just reduce the distance traveled on his dash attack. Same with Djeeta, and we already basically demonstrated her other change. Her 5L now has a lower hitbox, so it can hit people who are crouching. Katalina got some pretty interesting buffs in my opinion. First of all, she has the 5L change, so her 5L hits very far, so the fact that this actually hits lower, I think is going to help a lot. Next is Frozen Blade H, also known as her EX Fireball. What they did to this is they reduced the knockback distance. So now that this has less knockback, you can take your plus frames more easily. And more impressively, it actually launches on hit. And they went ahead and buffed the ultimate version as well. It is no longer -2 on block, it is actually +2. So now you can use this as a pressure tool from up close, which is very nice. Knockback has also been reduced to help with the plus frame situation, also very, very nice. And if you connect it against an airborne opponent, it will now wall bounce anywhere on screen for better mid-screen combo conversions. Charlotta, they buffed her ultimate Holy Ladder, basically her ultimate DP. They extended the hitbox downward so that now you can no longer cross over. So basically it will stop opponents from trying to roll. Lancelot, this is a character that a lot of people wanted to see some major changes for, and pretty much he only received nerfs. Let's go ahead and break those down, starting with his dash L. Basically, they said his dash L has been normalized. So just like everybody else, dash L does not travel as far, has the more pushback, has the hurt box, so his dash L is nowhere near as good or as scary as it was before. Next up is Wogenstrom Ultimate. That is the ultimate ice, the one that slows you down. You usually see this in block strings in the corner. Basically, they slowed it down from 15 frame startup to 18 frame startup, and this is designed to give you a little bit more time to try and react to it with a spot dodge or a DP, and basically not be guaranteed locked into being put in slow motion. And lastly, Blade Impulse Ultimate. Recovery when whiffed has been extended by 9 frames. So that is the neutral skip move. If this move whiffs, he just has way more recovery now, 9 frames more, so it is a total of 47 frames instead of 38. So if he does whiff this, you have a better chance of actually tagging him. Percival, this character has gotten some of the most buffs of anyone in the patch. We have to keep an eye on him. He might be one of the most improved characters. Only time will tell, but let's go ahead and break these down, starting with his long range L. Much like the other characters, his L has a lower hitbox on it, so it is less likely to whiff on crouchers. Next, his back throw. They reduced the distance traveled after the back throw just to give him better pressure options afterwards. Next, on Zundin Ultimate, the bed flames now inflict damage when coming in contact with guard point other than the character. Next, Schneiden, the L out of his Rekka comes out much faster now. It now comes out at 5 frames instead of 7. That means this move is now incredibly fast. Next up is Zaracen H. They basically increased the damage dealt from the powered up version all the way up to 2800 and 3500 respectively. They also increased the damage of the ultimate version. And for Traumedai, they reduced the recovery from 12 frames to 10 frames, or overall less recovery if you're trying to get fully charged up. Now for Ladiva. Ladiva's long range L, much like the others, has the downward hitbox extension. Crouching heavy now acts as a launcher when the second hit connects on the ground. Headbutt of Love now connects 1 frame sooner. It connects in 16 frames instead of 17. And they buffed the body slam. The distance thrown forward has been increased, as well as when Ladiva can actually grab you, she can grab you even closer to the ground. Most likely to go hand in hand with this change. Now for Metera. Metera's first change is for her 5L. Hers is another universal change, but this one only applies to characters with slower or long distance 5Ls. The change for this is they've increased the speed at which you can chain into these longer 5Ls. So before there's kind of a gap between doing like a 2L and the long range L, but they've basically shortened that. So you can do it much faster now on whiff or on block. Next, they buffed her Fireball. Starry Sky, both the high and low versions, now launch if you hit from point blank range. I can only imagine what kind of crazy situations that's going to lead to in the future. And lastly, they buffed her DP to prevent rolling. Lowain. Lowain had the hitbox downward extended on his 5L. And that is all. Ferry. Ferry had the universal change to her 5L to where she can chain it more quickly. They also buffed her DP to hit more downward, most likely to hit crouching opponents and prevent people from just ducking it and making it completely whiff. But the note says that it is not designed to stop crossovers. Zeta, I think, might have gotten away with murder. Zeta's changes are the fact that her 5L hits crouchers and her dash L had distance reduced. And that is all. Vaseraga, another character that received a ton of changes. Let's go ahead and break these down. He got the rapid speed cancel change, so his close range L can be canceled into much more quickly. Same with his long range. You can't even really see that, it's so fast. His dash M will now hit a crouching foe more quickly. So that just means his overhead is better and faster. It used to be a 25 frame overhead, now it is a 22 frame overhead. So next up, they buffed Savage Rampage, his stance. If you do the L version, follow-ups can be done 4 frames faster. All of the follow-ups from that will come out faster. From the medium version, however, everything comes out 6 frames faster. So a whole whopping 6 frames faster for every follow-up out of the medium. And the H version, if it connects on a grounded opponent, it forces them to stand up. Pretty crazy. They also changed the input of the march. Once you're in his stance, you no longer have to press forward. You can simply just hold forward and he will do the march out of any of his stances. He can also now completely cancel Savage Rampage by hitting down and the block button at the same time. They buffed his anti-air command grab to do the same amount of damage whether it is in a combo or not. And then they fixed an issue with the ultimate version. Narmaya reduced the distance traveled on her dash attack, and that is all. Soriz, he got the 5L chain change, so he can go into his 5L in a chain more quickly. Dash L reduced travel distance. His Impact Knuckle ultimate will no longer draw in foes who are hit from behind. And much like others, his DP can no longer be crossed over. Zooey, long range L hits further downward. And that is all. Cagliostro. No changes. Yuel, dash L distance traveled reduced. That is all. Uno extended the hitbox downward of its 5L, much like a lot of others. Ultimate Rakshasa has been significantly buffed. They did reduce the damage of it, but they made everything else about it better. They completely overhauled the recovery except for when it's whiffed. So as long as they block it at all, and this is a very hard move to not block, it is now -2 instead of -6. That is a very big difference. Also adjusted the knockback on hit so that it's easier to get a combo follow-up. Next is Mantra Wheel. They reduced the recovery on hit by 2 frames, and they reduced recovery on block by 2 frames. So now when you hit it, you can act faster, and when it's blocked, you are more plus. This move is +4 on block. It even recovers faster on whiff. Pretty crazy. They also reduced the knockback on block so that you can take more advantage of those plus frames. Eustace, he got the universal 5L change. His 5L is harder to duck now. That is all. 6. Now this is a character that a lot of people had their eye on for this patch, and they did do some pretty interesting things to him. So first of all, he got the 5L change. His 5L works better on crouchers. So the first move is his Gate of the Demon. This move receives some buffs and some nerfs. So the buff is when the first hit connects, the opponent is launched higher in the air to give him a better chance of comboing from mid-screen. However, now if you hit him as the fireball is coming out, the fireball will now disappear. as well as he now has more recovery when the move whiffs. He now has 6 more frames of recovery when he lands. This also applies to the mid-air version as well. Vira has received no changes. Anila actually got some pretty interesting buffs, starting with her dash attack. Her dash H, if it hits as a counter hit, it now wall bounces even mid-screen. Pretty cool. And the knockback on block has been increased to make it harder to punish. If you actually hit this from tip range, it is pretty darn safe. As you can see right there, -2, and they're very far away. So this is now a pretty threatening poke from the mid-range. Next is Flock to the Future Ultimate, basically the ultimate Totsugeki. It now starts up at 11 frames instead of 15, so this is considerably faster from a distance. However, to make up for this, they did increase the recovery on block. It is now -6 instead of -4 with reduced knockback, so you do got to be careful to not let this actually get blocked. However, if the move actually does connect, the opponent will be sent straight up into the air, giving you a chance to easily convert it into a combo. And lastly, they buffed Ramification, her unique skill. It now activates at 15 frames instead of 17, so it's 2 frames faster, and she moves faster right as it activates. It's overall a better, faster move. Siegfried, so this is kind of a funny one. I'm gonna take an educated guess here and say that they meant his dash attack because it just says Siegfried L reduced distance traveled. So yeah, I don't know what that means. I think they mean dash L. I'm going to assume it's a typo, but it says Siegfried L. That's pretty funny. And he got a bit of a nerf here, a slight one. His unblockable now has 2 more frames of recovery. It recovers in 26 frames instead of 24. Now it's time for public enemy number 1, Nier. She got some pretty considerable nerfs. This might finally be the end of her reign of terror. Let's go ahead and break this down. Long range L extended the hurt box downward, much like everybody else. Dash L reduced the distance traveled. Hers was a crazy one. Hers, I feel like, was one of the longest reaching for whatever reason, but as you can see, that is no longer the case. She is very far away from you after it has been blocked, and it does not even reach from that far. So the biggest thing is that they absolutely smoked Misfortune. This move, they shot it into the floorboards. So first things first, it no longer beats crossovers. You can just clearly and easily roll right through it. Keep in mind though, the ultimate version, however, will still hit crossovers. The biggest nerf to Misfortune, however, is this one right here, and that is the fact that follow-ups can no longer be performed if Misfortune is the starting skill. So if you look at my controller at the bottom, you can see I'm inputting other skills. They are not coming out. As long as you start with Misfortune, you can no longer string into anything else. You can only start with other strings, and that is it. So this change right here is single-handedly what was really making the character a massive problem. The fact that she could start with a DP and then pressure you. The fact that she cannot do this anymore, on top of the fact that you can roll past it, means that she's basically an entirely different character now. The way she was played pre-patch is 100% dead. To make up for all these Misfortune nerfs though, they did buff the startup of it. It does come out in 12 frames now, which is pretty fast instead of 18 frames, but due to the fact that it's effectively just a DP move now and not a offensive starter, means that, I mean, that change is negligible in the end. They also slightly nerfed Ominous Turn. Basically, if this move whiffs past the opponent, it is harder for death to actually hit them when she's on the opposite side. And Nier's recovery has been increased by 6 frames. Bubs, his long range L got the same change as everybody else, helps it hit crouchers, and that is all. Belial, he just got an issue fixed. They fixed an issue with his ultimate parry / command grab. Avatar, they went ahead and buffed Rejected Truth. The L version now starts up at 13 frames instead of 18 frames. Same for Carnal Passion M. They increased the startup to 21 frames from 22, so it comes out 1 frame faster, just a little bit faster than before. And the H version, they increased the distance traveled, so it actually goes a little bit further than before. Lucilius, no changes. And lastly, 2B, our premier guest character. So the first one is her skill gauge has basically been nerfed. The gauge recovery speed has been reduced when the opponent is blocking. So as you can see here, my skill gauge, once I start getting on the opponent's block, the gauge will dramatically slow down how much it recovers. It basically pauses. Next up is Multi-Strike Protocol. That is her unique auto combo. They reduce the amount of gauge you get back for connecting it. So as you can see here, if I spend some of her gauge and then connect her unique auto combo, it doesn't give me back quite as much meter as before. And then they fixed an issue on evasive maneuver and the A130 bomb. And with that, we have gone over all of the system and character changes for the new 1.30 patch for Gran Blue Versus. For first impressions, I'm pretty excited with this patch. I really like the changes specifically to dash attack and things like that. I think this is definitely a move in the right direction. The nerfs that we saw on the big, troublemaker characters seem to be pretty good. But as with all things, time will tell. We will see like what this will actually do to the meta and see who takes the place of, the most hated characters online. Because that always happens when one character gets knocked down and another takes its place. Someone else becomes the new hated character. But we'll see. Maybe this will put us in an era where characters are more balanced. So they don't feel like, they have to pick just, the 4 or 5 of the same ones over and over. But we will see. But as always, thanks so much for listening, guys. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed this. Subscribe if you want to see some upcoming Gran Blue matches, because we definitely are going to be doing a lot of matches on the patch, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. And as always, I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.